Hey, everybody, it's Doug Green, and I'm the publisher of Technology Reseller News. And I'm very pleased to have with us today Clinton Fitch of Ooma. Clinton, thank you for joining us today.
You bet, Doug. Thanks for having me.
So, we're going to be doing another podcast in our series on the race to replace POTS lines. And today we're going to be talking about a survey that Ooma actually performed out there. What did you guys do? What did you survey? What did you find?
Yeah, so it was an interesting experience for us. So we conducted a survey through Foundry. If you don't know who Foundry is, it's a parent company of CIO Magazine, and we found that 90% of enterprise customers are already moving towards some sort of POTS replacement. They either have a plan in place, or they're doing pilots, or something along those lines. What that means, though, is that 10% of those being surveyed had no plan. And it really is now a rush to get it done. These lines are continuing to go away, as we've talked about in the past. They're continuing to increase in price at an exponential rate. And so the pressure for enterprises to figure out how they want to go about POTS replacement is becoming even more critical. You know, if you take those numbers and you start diving into them a little bit, we found that increase in cost, 53% of those who responded cited that as one of the reasons that they had begun their POTS replacement journey. And then 45% of them also indicated that they were having integration problems, integrations with older fire alarm panels or security door entry systems, or any other legacy type device. The newer devices that are out there, they just don't really work well with POTS. And so that became a real challenge for them. A little over a third of them pointed out that lack of support and lack of service was becoming more of an issue. Customers are getting lines turned off, and in some cases they're getting very little, if any, notification that that's going to happen. And then they were just trying to go and find those solutions that would meet the regulatory requirements as well. You know, when you have a phone that's in an elevator, it's got to work, and not all POTS replacement solutions that are out there have the compliance to be able to put into those and satisfy the local fire rules and regulations.
So, I'm hearing that, I was going to ask about what are the issues you're hearing. There sounds like there's a lot. There's price, there's compliance, and there's just plain up it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? So reliability and compliance are the two I've already talked about. Availability. I'll give you a good example, Doug. If you are an enterprise and you are opening up a new location, whether it's a quick service restaurant or a full service restaurant or an office building, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Chances are you can't get a POTS line there anymore, right? The
Right.
the incumbent carriers are not expanding these networks; they're shrinking these networks. So in a situation where you have that new facility, you have to look for an alternative straight away. There is no choice there. But the other challenges that are happening now with POTS lines are the disruption of service. The carriers aren't required to maintain these networks anymore. They can start deprecating and have started deprecating these networks. So if you have a line cut that happens, across the street, somebody backhoes a line, it doesn't have to be fixed anymore.
Hmm.
And that's part of the challenge that organizations are finding too. They find out that the line's been cut and they're told that you're out of luck. It's not going to be fixed. Cost savings is another issue. We're seeing customers that are seeing anywhere from 300 to 800% bill increases month over month. And there's no regulation on the from the FCC now on the carriers. They can continue to increase that price at that clip until the customer says, no, I'm not going to pay that anymore, and moves to an alternative solution. The real challenge for organizations right now is the demand for POTS replacement continues to increase. As I said, 90% of enterprise customers are already thinking about this. The challenge with the sunset that's happening, and then you've got 90% of the customers out there or potential customers looking for a solution, you're going to start running into a traffic jam. And what I mean by that is, if you are one of the customers kind of down the queue, it could be a little while before you can get that replaced. and that could impact your business as well. If you have a building that has an elevator and don't have a compliant phone that's in that elevator, technically you're not supposed to run it, right? So you could run into some business disruption unexpectedly if you're not looking at these types of things right now.
So are these things driving a rush to migrate?
Yeah, absolutely. The push to get um, a solution in place to help cut the cost from the day to day or the month to month operation of that spots line is one thing, but it also comes down to, as I said earlier, compatibility, being able to integrate with existing um, existing fire alarm panels or elevator phones or whatever the case. Um, Customers need to start thinking about it now, right? Security and compliance. In our survey that we did with Foundry, 50% of them were saying that was a big issue. 47% were saying integration to existing systems. 45% business disruption. All of these things are way in on the need and the urgency now. Now we've been talking about it. Doug, you and I have talked about POTS replacement before. We had this 12, 18-month window where it was still being thought about, but it wasn't top of mind. We're at the point now, it has to be top of mind. It is becoming a real issue for a lot of businesses, big and small. Doesn't matter if you're a multi-location organization or you're a single location that has just 2 or 3 POTS lines. It's starting to disrupt everybody, and it's starting to disrupt nationally. It's not just 1 or 2 areas across the country. Doesn't matter if you're rural, if you're urban. These are all challenges that are kind of equal across the board for everybody when it comes to POTS now.
So with the survey and with what you're hearing from customers, what are people
Mhm.
actually looking for in a solution?
Yeah, so they're looking for a handful of things, right? So that reliability and the uptime is certainly one of them, and I've kind of talked about that enough, I think. Regulatory compliance is another thing. There are several key regulatory pieces, depending on what you're connecting a POTS replacement to. So NFPA 72, for example, that is for fire alarms, and ASME A17.1 is for elevator phones. These are regulatory compliances for that to be certified to work for an elevator, for example, right? That it has a specific a specific certification to work in that specific scenario. Ooma AirDial has those certifications. Not a lot of those solutions that are out there do. And so and we designed it, by the way, day one to have these certifications because we knew it was going to go into these types of environments for security panels and elevators and so forth. And so for customers, that's becoming a big deal too, and HIPAA compliance and other things that we have certified. I've mentioned before the integration of existing systems. That's continuing to be important. Business disruption is probably the one that everybody's more worried about. As I said earlier, if you have an elevator and there's not a phone in there, technically you're not supposed to be able to run that elevator. But it's not just that. Think about a hospital or another type of organization that does a lot of high volume fax and faxing. Faxing is not going away. It's been around since the 70s. It's never going to die, I'm pretty sure. But these high volume faxes, if that hospital or that auto dealership also does a lot of high volume fax, if they can't do those faxes, they're kind of dead in the water. So it's really important for them to avoid those business disruptions if at all possible. And with the unreliability now that's in the mix when it comes to POTS, that's another thing that's weighing in on it. Reputation and support is another key thing. Ooma, we've been around for over 20 years. We've been doing POTS replacement for that long. We started in the residential space. We are still there. We're still in the small to medium business and enterprise space as well. The foundation that Ooma AirDial is built on and uses on the back end is that same tried and true cloud-based infrastructure that we've always had. We've always been based in the cloud. And you've got a support team that knows POTS replacement. They know it really well, and they're there for you all the time, 24/7, 365. So the other thing about AirDial is feature set, or POTS replacement is feature set. So with older POTS lines, you didn't know if it was working until you tried to make a phone call and it wasn't working. With AirDial, we have a lot more proactive features that are built into it. So notifications, for example, you can be notified if a device goes online or offline, if it goes on battery power, or how the LTE signal is, and all the other things. But you can also get notifications if a phone call actually happens. So let's use the elevator scenario again. You have somebody who makes an emergency call in an elevator. You can be notified that that call has happened as the property manager of a building, for example. So you know proactively that something is going on, and you're not being reactionary when you see the fire truck starting to pull up on that as well. And then we have some other baked in technology here that's really important from a POTS and business continuity perspective. We have a technology called multipath technology, multipath transport. And what this does is essentially replicates the voice across a wired and a wireless connection at the same time. And it's the best packet wins, if you will. So the customer on the end of that, the end user making the call, they have no idea if it's on wired or wireless, or if it's switched in the middle of the call. It just makes sure that the call stays up. And this is a patented technology we've had in some other solutions that Ooma's had in the market a while. We just brought it over to AirDial earlier last quarter. And it is a significant step up from what POTS could do, traditional POTS could do by itself. And we have a lot of other feature functionality, but you look at a POTS solution, a POTS replacement solution like AirDial. It's not just replacing what was there, it's enhancing what was there and making it far more reliable, far more informational, and proactive for our customers.
Well, Clinton, I really want to thank you for joining me today. This has been really interesting. I've learned a lot. I didn't realize, as much as we've been reporting on this, that it's not just a replacement, it's actually a step forward. You're actually getting a richer experience. You're arming the company with more tools. Where can we learn more? Where can we get started with this?
Yeah, so the easiest way to do it is go to ooma.com/airdial. That will get you in contact with our team, who can help you not only with the solution, but also figuring out how many POTS lines do you have. One of the things that we really emphasize as an organization is doing an audit. And an audit could be as simple as you taking your phone bill, figuring out what devices are connected to what phone lines. And we find, I don't have a statistic for this, but I would say that the majority of our customers find that they're paying for a POTS line that they don't even use anymore, and they haven't used for a long
Right.
time, right? So that audit becomes really important. But we can help you with that. We can help you figure out how many AirDial devices you need for your campus or your single location, where your POTS lines are located, and all of those other things. And then that'll also give you some key information about the solution itself. So ooma.com/airdial, that's the gateway to everything related to the device, and we'll get you started on your POTS migration.
Clinton, again, thank you very much indeed for joining me today. I'm looking forward to our next one.
You bet. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.